Common Core Writing Lesson Field Experience. This is Diane Savage. I chose to do my experience in my English 2 class. I chose my anchor standard, and then as far as the specific standard for the class, I went into the 9 through 10 grade levels and applied it for my own students. As far as my current writing practices, we write at least a paragraph in response to text read by the whole class or in their SSR books. I try to do that at least once a week. We complete 30-line grammar exercises to hone their editing skills, and this is how I address grammar as a whole. And then any problematic grammar that comes up either there or in their papers, I address in mini lessons. The format for writing is typically the 5-paragraph essay format. They do write more than that and sometimes less, but that's the format we use of the intro, body, and conclusion structure. Graphic organizers are used as both pre-writing exercises or as demonstration of learning, so they're very familiar with them. Outlining is used to help students finalize the organization and details for their writing. Sometimes I stop at this step because if they have what they need in the outline, and I usually make them use sentences in the outline anyway, the paper's there. The difference is just not in paragraphs. And then finally, rubrics are consistent throughout the year and quite honestly throughout our department for all narrative, informative, and argumentative essays for familiarity. We use the suggested Common Core rubrics. More current practices. As a school, we're working on writing arguments across the building. We were encouraged to use argument writing for one of our SLOs this year. And when I say that, I mean social studies, science, we're all doing it. In fact, we just taught the English department led professional development and helped other departments learn how to help their students write arguments, and it doesn't necessarily mean writing whole papers. As part of this, sophomore year, students focus on the addition of a counter argument to their claim, support, and evidence. Students will ultimately write an essay at the end of the year or maybe third quarter. But prior to this, they read examples of good and bad arguments. They create numerous claims for which they need to list support, evidence, and consider counter arguments. They participate in debates, and they use 9 through 12 Common Core argument writing rubrics. Field Experience Unit Overview. Just to understand where my mini lesson fits in, this was a personal narrative unit, and students were asked to write a 3-paragraph personal narrative in which they reflected on themselves and the community in which they're most active, and how they positively affect that community and how the community makes them who they are. And that's a really long, confusing sentence. In paragraph 1, they provide a description of their room in such a way that we learn their interests, activities, likes, and dislikes. In paragraph 2, they describe a typical day, hour, session within their chosen community, which could be school, activity, somewhere even chose home because that's where they're most comfortable. And then in paragraph 3, they reflect on their time in their community, and they have to talk about what about the community helps them grow and how they help the community grow. So the overall focus of the unit was narrative writing with a focus on details and descriptive writing. So I focused on obviously writing narratives to develop real or imaginative experiences or events using effective technique, well-chosen details, and well-structured event sequences. And the more focused piece of that was to use precise words and phrasings, telling details, and sensory language to convey a vivid picture of the experiences, events, setting, and or characters. My chosen anchor standard for my lesson, however, dealt with production and distribution of writing, and with a focus on develop and strengthen writing as needed by planning, revising, editing, rewriting, or trying a new approach. If you look at the 9 through 10 grade level standard, tacked on the end is focusing on addressing what is most significant for a specific purpose and audience. So is more of a content-driven one along with the revising and editing. These are the conventions of standard English. and knowledge of language is expected for 9 through 10. Um, I'm going over those, skipping by them quickly for the sake of time. Um, the When I was looking for lessons, what I basically did was I took the demonstration and collaborative engagement and put them together. I used the editing circle that's suggested on page 145, excuse me, and I changed it to an editing and revising circle, like I said, because of the content issue. So it is demonstrated by the teacher and a small group of students the day before so that we can hop right into it the next day. Students will sit in a large circle and the teacher will stand in the center with a timer. One of the 3 periods that I did this, we had more papers than we did students because someone left early. So I hopped into their seat. For that class, it was effective because it was my class of 16. I would not have done that with my class of 30. I can tell you it worked out really well. And the students thought it was nice that some of them got my comments. Students are given 5 minutes to complete each reading. The teacher will extend or shorten time as necessary. Um, the last 2, they read the whole paper, so they definitely need more than 5 minutes. And in some cases, like the first couple, they needed more than 5 just to kind of get into what they were doing. And then when they're done, they pass the paper to the left. In this editing circle, what it suggests is that you sit in a circle and each student has a paper, and each student is given a role, like capitals editor, spelling editor, and you read each paper to make sure all the capitals are there or the spelling's all right. I think with the younger grades, that's great because then they're always looking for the same thing and it's easy to focus. With my students, they get bored looking for the same thing every time. So I adjusted, and you were either reader 1, reader 2, reader 3, reader 4, which you'll see in a minute. So what they were reading for changed every time. Students for this lesson, they bring their written or typed draft of their 3 paragraphs, and then the circle editing sheet was provided by the teacher. So this is the top half of the circle editing sheet. As you see here, readers 1 and 2 read the same thing. They read paragraph 1 and answer the question, do you learn about the writer as you read? Write one thing that you learned about them, and then list one thing your writer can add more description to and give him or her a suggestion. So, a couple sample comments here. I learned you like pink and have lots of books in your room. Well, okay, but what does that tell you about the person? A better comment might be, you must like to read because you have lots of books in your room. And then when they're asked to provide, examples, suggest something. Oh, but this paragraph was perfect. I got a lot of those early on. A better comment might be, what are some of the titles of the books that you read so that you can learn a little more about what they like to read? Readers 3 and 4 read paragraph 2. This is the community paragraph. So what community is the writer powerful in? If they totally miss the answer on this one, then you haven't done your job as a writer. Write one thing here that you've learned about the writer's role in the community and one positive thing about this community. If you don't see one, give him or her a suggestion. This one is where the kids are starting to learn about each other. So I got a lot of comments like this. You're the quarterback, that's awesome. Or I didn't know you teach music lessons. Preferably they might have said something a little more personality revealing. Being a quarterback makes you a leader, but what happens when you get hurt? Or the kids that learn from you are really lucky. Do they remind you of yourself when you were first learning? Readers 5 and 6 read paragraph 3. How is the writer becoming a better person by being a part of their community? And how are they helping their community be better? Most students had no trouble finding a positive result of being part of the community, but struggled with the helping the community piece. And the students I'm talking about here are the writers. So in this section, there were a lot of missing comments for how they help the community. So as a result, once we were done with all the editing, I had students pair up and talk to each other about paragraph 3. Sometimes it takes an outsider looking in to see the good that you're doing. For example, the student that teaches music lessons. Very humble, very quiet. Well, all I'm doing is teaching kids to learn to play an instrument. That's not that big of a deal. And his buddy helped show him, no, that's a really big deal. You're helping these kids love music. You're, patient. And I know that because I know you. So those are the types of things he was able to go back and put in his paper. Finally, readers 7 and 8, I'm sorry I cut off 7 here. Read the entire essay. Does the essay flow? So they're looking for transitions. They look for run-ons and fragments. And then they mark any other grammar or misspellings on the paper. And then they're asked to say one thing the writer did well and something they need to work on. The reason I specifically cited run-ons and fragments is we had done a mini lesson during this unit. Most students found fragments but struggle with finding run-ons. And unfortunately, most of the positive comments were things like, great job, you're a good writer, never knew that, things like that. And the negative comments were left blank. They're not really comfortable with that right now. And I'm going to reflect on this in a minute, but I realized as I was looking at that, I asked them to do way too much in one reading there. So lessons learned, what worked? This was definitely more successful than previous peer editing sessions because there were questions students actually had to answer about the content. So it gave students, the writing students, feedback that content that should be in there was or wasn't there. If for no other reason, they got something concrete. Previously, when they're asked to judge and be critical, the students aren't that comfortable with that. So by starting them out with these concrete answers, these yes or no's, it was a little easier for them. Students were able to read 8 papers. It allows them to learn about their classmates, which is good because they tend to sit in their groups and not high school students don't really want to meet new people all the time. But I heard a lot of, that's neat, I didn't know that about you, which was really cool. And they get to see examples of writing other than the people that they usually pair with when they're allowed to choose. And they got examples of how they might change their own writing. They also got examples of, oh, hey, I thought my writing was bad, but I might be doing pretty good. And I hate to say that, but I had some students that they're very hard on themselves, but they're excellent writers. So having some examples of people that aren't quite on par with them shows them that, hey, I'm not doing half bad. I don't think that's a bad thing. Students stayed on task when they only had 5 minutes to work with, which was good. Plus, I put them near people they wouldn't talk to. But that was really good. It's hard to keep them on task all the time. What didn't work, those items that required critical comments were not as well done. I have to do this more often and do it again and more frequently so they're more comfortable with being critical. And maybe I'll do this on smaller assignments where they have to read a couple things. And then I need them to see how to write critical comments. I remembered I found this picture on Pinterest. I plan to create a bulletin board. It tells people how to start comments on writing. Readers 7 and 8 need more specific direction. All that was consistently found, as mentioned before, were spelling errors and fragments, and I think this is in part because those were the only 2 things that were really focused on in the comments. So next time I'll restructure and split grammar issues to give readers 1 or 2 things to look for. Read for transitions and flow, read for run-ons and fragments, read for spelling and punctuation or parallel structure. Finally, and this is a question to you, what do you do with students that don't have a complete draft and can't fully participate? So I allowed them to participate through whatever paragraph they'd finished, and then they had to leave the circle of trust. And yes, I said it like that. So they got a kick out of it and didn't seem quite so isolated, and they were expected to complete their drafts for all the rest of us edited. On this one, I don't know what to do differently. They miss out on the editing and don't earn full points, but those aren't the best motivators in the world. So do you think this is a good policy? I don't like isolating students. Hey, go sit in the corner and finish writing, but it's the best I can come up with right now. These are my sources. The bottom one is the website for that picture that I got off of Pinterest. I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you.